In this video, we are doing a quick overview of the Gizmo Big Bang lab report that you are collecting data for and writing up for our course. All right, in week 5, you will see a Modeling the Expanding Universe lab activity. So by reading through this lab activity, it points out some key things to know when you are doing each section. So this is really important to read through so that you save yourself some time. Note that the Gizmo instructions do say there are 10 stars, but you do not need to do 10 stars. You need to do at least 6, and you must do stars A. There are 2 of them, and then B, C, and D, and then the 6th star is your own choice from what is left over. You can get into the Gizmo by logging in, and here are the activity sheets. So you'll see a sheet like this that's several pages, and if you scroll to the end, you will see this data table, which I mentioned momentarily. So in part A, A and B takes about an hour to complete. When I did it for 10 stars, and it took me about an hour to do sections A and B. So I strongly recommend when you're collecting data, if you can, do it when you have about an hour and a half that you can sit and collect data. And I will explain in a second why. So you are going to go to the last page in the Gizmo student activity. You'll see a data table, and this is the thing that I want you to open up a Word document or a Google Doc to recreate that table where you're going to enter your own data. This table you are going to submit, so it's worth doing because you will be submitting it, and it'll make life hopefully a little easier for you when you're doing this. A lot of the vocab shouldn't be brand new to you. We've been working up to this the previous 4 weeks. There'll be a few new words, but for the most part, these are terms that you should be comfortable with already. When you make that data table, it's, as I said, it's strongly advised that you copy the data into your data table as you go. So if the Gizmo site crashes, or you decide to close the Gizmo actual data collection because you are stepping away to, go have lunch or something, the data is not saved in the Gizmo program for you, and you must have data in there to do all parts A, B, C, and D. And the Gizmo itself will do calculations for you based on the data you put into that electronic Gizmo data table. So, which is unfortunate that it doesn't save it for you. So I'm just giving you that little note so hopefully it saves you a bit of a headache, so that if your program closes, you don't all of a sudden realize you've lost 30 minutes of data collection. For part B, luminosity and distance, some terms you have heard before. Part C talks about redshift, again, what we have talked about. And all those parts will culminate in part D. That data will be used to make some calculations, and some graphs will be created for you, or you will be creating them within Gizmo. This doesn't take as long as part A and B. And this is the part that relates mostly to the part of the lab you are writing up. So there will be 2 graphs created in this section. You can take screenshots of them and use them directly for your lab report, or you are welcome to use the data collected to make your own graphs in Excel or Google Sheets. You will submit the Gizmo data collection pages, but that's formative. I just want to make sure that you've done them. You can say, yes, I've collected my own data. If you are choosing to work with someone in our class, that's okay. What is going to happen is when you write up your lab report, it's important in the header of the document that you submit that you include your partner's name. And if you have more than one partner, okay, that's fine, but just make sure that you include everyone that you worked with, hopefully not more than one other person. But you need to include that information so that when I see your labs, if there's similarity in your data, I don't get, ask about plagiarism. So you're welcome to work with a lab partner. Just make sure you give all those people credit in the header of your lab. So the next part is in week 6. That's the week I'm giving you to write up your lab report. And you will see here Modeling the Expanding Universe Lab, Outline, and Components. And so what I've done first is I've made a checklist, and that's to use at the very end when you are done your lab. Sometimes people find it helpful to just double check they have everything they need, and this is what it looks like. So this is something you could just go through, check, check, check. Yes, I've done all of these things. But it's still important that you read this part of our Canvas page. So we have you'll be submitting a PDF Word or Google Doc, similar to what you probably would do at your school, maybe in the middle school or grade 9 and 10. There's 3 parts: a results section, which is thinking and investigation, and that's the data you collected. That's your table and graphs. A discussion section, which is application, and you'll state a trend, describe the trends, and then explain your observations. And then you have a reference section where you need at least minimum two information sources from reputable sources and include them as in-text citations in the discussion. So specifically for the results, you're going to have that data table that you collected information or data from the Gizmo activity for 6 and not 10 stars. If you want to do 10, that's absolutely fine. That is something you created as you went along, so that should be done by the time you are finished collecting data. Then there are the 2 graphs. As I said, you can use the screenshots of the 2 graphs that you made in Gizmo. You'll need to add informative titles to them because the program doesn't do that for you, or you can make your own using Excel or Google Sheets. The 2 graphs, one is redshift versus distance, and one is velocity versus distance. For the discussion, for each of the graphs, you need 1 sentence each to state the trend. So that is, you're saying, as seen in graph 1, as this changes, this is how this variable changes. And then you're going to support those 2 trend statements with example data points. So for example, if it's a linear relationship, which we hope it is, you're only going to need 2 data points to really illustrate the trend. So that might sound like the trend is this, that's your trend statement. And then you say, as for example, as seen in graph 1, when the value A was B, then the value C was larger at this value. So again, clear, direct statement. You don't need to make it flowery. It's a clear statement of what the trend is and how data would illustrate your trend. Then you're explaining the overall trend. So ideally, the 2 graphs are really illustrating the same concept or the same observation. So you're not explaining both graphs independently or separately. You are explaining the overall observations. And so this, I think, could be about 4 well thought out sentences, no filler in there. You should include at least 2 in-text citations, and note that those in-text citations, the resources you use do not need to be scholarly. They don't need to be academic journal articles, but they do need to be from reliable, reputable sources. So not a site that some random person creates who doesn't have any qualifications. Things you might include that might come up in your explanation could include Swan-Leavitt. It could include luminosity, apparent brightness, and distance. It could include stuff about spectra. It could include redshift and Hubble's observations. Does it need to include all of those? Absolutely not. Those are just concepts, ideas that came up during the Gizmo that you might want to talk about, but you definitely do not need to talk about all of them. I would rather you explained 2 really well as opposed to explain all of those in a very shallow way. And then for communication, that's an overall mark, thinking about using scientific terminology appropriately, units when units are necessary, and decimal places are consistent. If you have not learned about significant figures or sig figs, that is okay. Not everyone has, so you do not need to use them if you have not learned them. If you've learned them and you love them, you can go ahead and think about significant figures. Graphs are formatted appropriately, making sure they have titles and then axis labels with units. If you need to add them yourself, the labels and units are already on the graphs that are made through the Gizmo. And then in-text citations are included where appropriate in the correct format. So it can be APA or MLA. I believe somewhere I note that it should be APA, but it can be APA, MLA. Just pick a format and then do it consistently and correctly. That's the most important thing. And you need 2 sources for that. All right, I hope this is helpful, and remember, reach out and ask questions if you have any.